Before I call the Chancellor, I would like to make a short statement. Over the last few days, ministers have made a series of new policy announcements with significant and wide-ranging implications for the government's fiscal policy and for the public finances. It is evident to me that they should have been made in this House in the first instance. The principle is clearly and unambiguously set out in the paragraph 9.1 of the Ministerial Code. The premature disclosure of the contents of this House, contents of the budget, have always been regarded as a supreme discourtesy to this House and all of its democratically elected MPs, not to mention to Mr. Speaker and the Chairman of Ways and Means. I really don't need any help. Let me remind the Treasury front bench. The budget statement and ensuing resolutions are the most important Ways and Means business of the House, Erskine May 36-33. I am disappointed by comments made by government spokespeople believing they can use precedent as an excuse. I am telling them today that they are entirely wrong. Mr. Speaker has always defended the undoubted right of this House, including opposition parties and backbenchers on all sides of this House, to be the first to hear major government policy announcements on behalf of their constituents. As Chairman of Ways and Means, I have responsibility to oversee the House's consideration of the budget fairly and impartially, and to ensure that honourable members on all sides of this House have adequate opportunity to hold the Chancellor to account. Finally, we collectively, we should all remember to respect the Chair, respect our colleagues, and to respect this House. Now, before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I am remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of the Leader of the Opposition or of the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On July the 4th, the country voted for change. This government was given a mandate to restore stability to our economy and to begin a decade of national renewal, to fix the foundations and deliver change through responsible leadership in the national interest. That is our task, and I know that we can achieve it. My belief in Britain burns brighter than ever, and the prize on offer is immense. As my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said on Monday, change must be felt. More pounds in people's pockets, an NHS that is there when you need it, an economy that is growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all, because that is the only way to improve living standards. And the only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. There are no shortcuts. And to deliver that investment, we must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years. This is not the first time that it has fallen to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, It was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again. And while this is the first budget in more than 14 years to be delivered by a Labour Chancellor, it is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman. I am deeply proud to be Britain's first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. To girls and young women everywhere, I say, let there be no ceiling on your ambition, your hopes and your dreams. And along with the pride that I feel standing here today, there is also a responsibility to pass on a fairer society and a stronger generation to the next generation of women. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite failed our country. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages. The British people have inherited their failure. A black hole in the public finances. Public services on their knees. A decade of low growth and the worst Parliament on record for living standards. Let me begin with the public finances. In July, I exposed a £22 billion black hole at the heart of the previous government's plans. A series of promises that they made but had no money to deliver. Covered up from the British people, covered up from this House. The Treasury's reserve, set aside for genuine emergencies, spent 3 times over just 3 months into the financial year. Today, on top of the detailed document that I have provided to the House in July, the government is publishing a line-by-line breakdown of the £22 billion black hole that we inherited. It shows hundreds of unfunded pressures on the public finances this year and into the future too. The Office for Budget Responsibility have published their own review of the circumstances around the spring budget forecast. They say that the previous government, and I quote, did not provide the OBR with all the information to them. Known about these undisclosed pressures that have since come to light, then their spring budget forecast for spending would have been, and I quote again, materially different. Let me be clear. That means any comparison between today's forecast and the OBR's March forecast is false, because the party opposite hid the reality of their public spending plans. At the very same budget, they made another £10 billion worth of cuts to national insurance. It was the height of irresponsibility, and they knew it, because they had run out of road and they called an election to avoid making difficult choices. So let me make this promise to the British people. Never again will we allow a government to play fast and loose with the public finances. And never again will we allow a government to hide the true state of our public finances from our independent forecaster. That's why today I can confirm that we will implement in full the 10 recommendations from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibilities review. But the country has inherited not just broken public finances, but broken public services too. The British people can see and they can feel that in their everyday lives. NHS waiting lists at record levels. Children in porter cabins as school roofs crumble. trains that do not arrive, rivers filled with polluted waste, prisons overflowing, crimes which are not investigated and criminals who are not punished. That is the country's inheritance from the party opposite. But they had no plan to improve our public services, and they had no plan to put our public finances on a stable footing. Quite the opposite. Since 2021, there have been no detailed plans for departmental spending set out beyond this year. And their plans relied on a baseline for spending this year, which we now know was wrong, because it did not take into account the £22 billion black hole. The previous government also failed to budget for costs that they knew would materialise. That includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices.
I just mentioned respecting colleagues. The public are watching. They want to hear what the Chancellor has to say. Simmer down.
I would politely suggest that honourable members listen to this, because it includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices: the infected blood scandal and the Post Office Horizon scandal. The Leader of the Opposition rightly made an unequivocal apology for the injustice of the infected blood scandal on behalf of the British state. But he did not budget for the costs of compensation. Today, for the very first time, we will provide specific funding to compensate those infected and those affected in full. With £11.8 billion in this budget. And I am also today setting aside £1.8 billion to compensate victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal. Redress that is long overdue for the pain and injustice that they have suffered. Madam Deputy Speaker, the leadership campaign for the party opposite has now been going on for over 3 months. But in all that time, not one single apology for what they did to our country. Because the Conservative Party has not changed. But this is a changed Labour Party, and we will restore stability to our country once again. The scale and seriousness of the situation that we have inherited cannot be underestimated. Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion. Any Chancellor standing here today would have to face this reality. And any responsible Chancellor would take action. That is why today I am restoring stability to our public finances and rebuilding our public services. As a former economist at the Bank of England, I know what it means to respect our economic institutions. I want to put on record my thanks to the Governor of the Bank, Andrew Bailey, and to the Independent Monetary Policy Committee. Today, I can confirm that we will maintain the MPC's target of 2% inflation, as measured by the 12-month increase in the Consumer Prices Index. I want to thank James Bowler, the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, and my team of officials. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to thank my predecessors as Chancellor of the Exchequer for their wise counsel as I have prepared for this budget. In particular, I would like to thank the former Right Honourable Member for Spelthorne for his invaluable advice in this weekend's papers, where he concluded that his mini-budget, and I quote, wasn't perfect. Well, for once, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think him and I are in absolute agreement. Finally, I want to thank Richard Hughes and his team at the Office for Budget Responsibility for their work in preparing today's economic and fiscal outlook. Let me now take the House through that forecast. The cost of living crisis under the last government stretched household finances to their limit, with inflation hitting a peak of above 11%. Today, the OBR say that CPI inflation will average 2.5% this year, 2.6% in 2025, then 2.3% in 2026, 2.1% in 2027, 2.1% in 2028, and 2.0% in 2029. Next, I move on to economic growth. Today's budget marks an end to short-termism. So I am pleased that for the first time, the OBR have published not only 5-year growth forecasts, but a detailed assessment of the growth impacts of our policies over the next decade too. And the new Charter for Budget Responsibility, which I am publishing today, confirms that this will become a permanent feature of our framework. The OBR forecast that real GDP growth will be 1.1% in 2024, 2.0% in 2025, 1.8% in 2026, 1.5% in 2027, 1.5% in 2028, and 1.6% in 2029. And the OBR are clear. This budget will permanently increase the supply capacity of the economy, boosting long-term growth. Every budget, it might sound shocking to them, but this government is boosting long-term economic growth. Every budget that I deliver will be focused on our mission to grow the economy. And underpinning that mission are the 7 key pillars of our growth strategy, developed and delivered alongside business, all driven forward by our excellent Financial Secretary to the Treasury. First, and most important, is to restore economic stability. That is my focus today. Second, increasing investment and building new infrastructure is vital for productivity. So we are catalysing £70 billion of investment through our National Wealth Fund. And we are transforming our planning rules to get Britain building again. Third, to ensure that all parts of the UK can realise their potential, we are working with the devolved governments and partnering with our mayors to develop local growth plans. Fourth, to improve employment prospects and skills, we are creating Skills England, delivering our plans to make work pay and tackling economic inactivity. Fifth, we are launching our long-term modern industrial strategy and expanding opportunities for our small and medium-sized businesses to grow. Sixth, to drive innovation, we are protecting record funding for research and development to harness the full potential of the UK's science base. And finally, to maximise the growth benefits of our clean energy mission, we have confirmed key investments such as carbon capture and storage to create jobs in our industrial heartlands. Our approach is already having an impact. Just 2 weeks ago, we delivered an international investment summit which saw businesses commit £63.5 billion of investment into our country, creating nearly 40,000 jobs across the United Kingdom. But we cannot undo 14 years of damage in one go. Economic growth will be our mission for the duration of this Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we set out the fiscal rules that would guide this government. I am confirming those today. Our stability rule and our investment rule. The stability rule means that we will bring the current budget into balance so that we do not borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We will meet this rule in 2029-30 until that becomes the 3rd year of the forecast. From then on, we will balance the current budget in the 3rd year of every budget held annually each autumn. That will provide a tougher constraint on day-to-day spending so that difficult decisions cannot be constantly delayed or deferred. The OBR say that the current budget will be in deficit by £26.2 billion in 2025-26 and £5.2 billion in 2026-27, before moving into surplus of £10.9 billion in 2027-28 £9.3 billion in 2028-29 and £9.9 billion in 2029-30, meeting our stability rule 2 years early. Monthly public sector finance data show that government borrowing in the first 6 months of this year was already running significantly higher than the OBR's March forecast. And so the OBR confirmed today that borrowing in this financial year is now £127 billion, reflecting the inheritance left by the party opposite. The increase in the net cash requirement in 2024-25 is lower than the increase in borrowing, at £22.3 billion higher than the spring forecast. Because of the action that we are taking, borrowing falls from 4.5% of GDP this year to 2.1% of GDP by the end of the forecast. Public sector net borrowing will be £105.6 billion in 2025-26, £88.5 billion in 2026-27, £72.2 billion in 2027-28, £71.9 billion in 2028-29, and £70.6 billion in 2029-2030. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I come to tax, it is vital that we are driving efficiency and reducing wasteful spending. In July, to begin delivering and dealing with our inheritance, I made £5.5 billion of savings this year. Today, we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year by using technology more effectively and joining up services across government. As set out in our manifesto, I will shortly be appointing our COVID Corruption Commissioner. They will lead our work to uncover those companies that used a national emergency to line their own pockets, because that money belongs in our public services and taxpayers want that money back. And I can confirm today that David Goldstone has been appointed as the chair of the new Office for Value for Money to help us realise the benefits from every pound of public spending. Today, I am also taking 3 steps to ensure that welfare spending is more sustainable. First, we inherited the last government's plans to reform the work capability assessment. We will deliver those savings as part of our fundamental reforms to the health and disabilities benefit system that my right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, will bring forward. Second, I can today announce a crackdown on fraud in our welfare system, often the work of criminal gangs. We will expand DWP's counter-fraud teams, using innovative new methods to prevent illegal activity and provide new legal powers to crack down on fraudsters, including direct access to bank accounts to recover debt. This package saves £4.3 billion a year by the end of the forecast. Third, the Government will shortly be publishing the Get Britain Working White Paper, tackling the root causes of inactivity with an integrated approach across health, education and welfare. And we will provide £240 million for 16 trailblazer projects targeted at those who are economically inactive and most at risk of being out of education, employment or training, to get people into work and to reduce the benefits bill. Before a government could consider any change to a tax rate or threshold, it must ensure that people pay what they already owe. So we will invest to modernise HMRC systems using the very best technology and recruit additional HMRC compliance and debt staff. We will clamp down on those umbrella companies who exploit workers, increase the interest rate on unpaid tax debt to ensure that people pay on time, and go after the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. These measures to reduce the tax gap raise £6.5 billion by the end of the forecast, and I want to thank the Exchequer Secretary for his outstanding work on this agenda. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that for working people up and down our country, family finances are stretched and paychecks don't go as far as they once did. So today I am taking steps to support people with the cost of living. It was the Labour government that introduced the national minimum wage in 1999. It had a transformative impact on the lives of working people. As promised in our manifesto, we asked the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living for the first time. I can confirm that we will accept the Low Pay Commission recommendation to increase the national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker. And for the first time, we will move towards a single adult rate phased in over time by initially increasing the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds by 16.3% as recommended by the Low Pay Commission, taking it to £10 an hour. A Labour policy to protect working people being delivered by a Labour government once again. Second, I have heard representations from colleagues across this House about the carers allowance and the impact of the current policy on carers looking to increase the hours that they work, including from the honourable members for Shipley, the honourable member for Scarborough and Whitby, and the right honourable member for Kingston and Surbiton too. Carers allowance currently provides up to £81.90 per week to help those with additional caring responsibilities. Today, I can confirm that we are increasing the weekly earnings limit to the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage per week, the largest increase in carers allowance since it was introduced in 1976. This means that a carer can now earn over £10,000 a year while receiving carers allowance, allowing them to increase their hours where they want to and keep more of their money. I am also concerned about the cliff edge in the current system and the issue of overpayments. My right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, has announced an independent review to look at the issue of overpayments, and we will work across this House to develop the right solutions. Third, we will provide £1 billion from next year to extend the Household Support Fund and discretionary housing payments to help those facing financial hardship with the cost of essentials. Fourth, having heard representations from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Trussell and others to reduce the level of debt repayments that can be taken from a household's universal credit payment each month by reducing it from 25% to 15% of their standard allowance. This means that 1.2 million of the poorest households will keep more of their award each month, lifting children out of poverty, and those who benefit will gain an average of £420 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, our plan to make work pay will also protect working people. I know that the party opposite are deeply interested in our plans here. Having seen their colleagues repeatedly dismissed at short notice, I know that they are worried about their future under the Right Honourable Member for North West Essex. So they should rest easy, knowing that our plan will protect working people from unfair dismissal. It will safeguard them from bullying in the workplace. And it will improve their access to paternity and maternity leave. I hope that the new Shadow Cabinet will soon be grateful for these increased protections at work. It is right that we protect those who have worked all their lives. In our manifesto, we promised to transfer the Investment Reserve Fund in the Mine Workers' Pension Scheme to members. And I have listened closely to my honourable friends for Easington, Doncaster Central, Blaenau Gwent and Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on this issue. Today, we are keeping our promise so that working people who powered our country receive the fair pension that they are owed. Our manifesto committed to the triple lock, meaning spending on the state pension is forecast to rise by over £31 billion by 2029-30 to ensure that our pensioners are protected in their retirement. This commitment means that while working age benefits will be uprated in line with CPI at 1.7%, the basic and new state pension will be uprated by 4.1% in 2025-26. This means that over 12 million pensioners will gain up to £470 next year, up to £275 more than if uprated by inflation. The pension credit standard minimum guarantee will also rise by 4.1%, from around £11,400 per year to around £11,850 a year for a single pensioner. While I have sought to protect working people with measures to reduce the cost of living, I've had to take some very difficult decisions on tax. I want to set out my approach to fuel duty. Baked into the numbers that I inherited from the previous government is an assumption that fuel duty will rise by RPI next year and that the temporary 5p cut will be reversed. To retain the 5p cut and to freeze fuel duty again would cost over £3 billion next year. At a time when the fiscal position is so difficult, I have to be frank with the House that this is a substantial commitment to make. I have concluded that in these difficult circumstances, while the cost of living remains high, and with a backdrop of global uncertainty, increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p per litre. So I have decided today to freeze fuel duty next year, and I will maintain the existing 5p cut for another year too. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol pumps next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last government made cuts of £20 billion to employees and self-employed national insurance in their final two budgets. These tax cuts were not honest, because we now know that they were based on a forecast which the OBR say would have been materially different. It would have been materially different had they known the true extent of the last government's cover-up. Since July, I have been urged on multiple occasions to reconsider these cuts, to increase the taxes that working people pay and see in their payslips. But I have made an important choice today, to keep every single commitment that we made on tax in our manifesto. So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance, I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. Working people will not see higher taxes in their payslips as a result of the choices that I am making today. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. But any responsible Chancellor would need to make difficult decisions today, to raise the revenues required to fund our public services and to restore economic stability. So in today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. We will increase the rate of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. And we will reduce the secondary threshold, the level at which employers start paying national insurance on each employee's salary, from £9,100 a year to £5,000. This will raise £25 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. I know that this is a difficult choice. I do not take this decision lightly. We are asking businesses to contribute more, and I know that there will be impacts of this measure felt beyond businesses too, as the OBR has set out today. But in the circumstances...
Order, Chancellor! Order! Our constituents are watching. They need to be able to hear the Chancellor. Simmer down. Chancellor.
But in the circumstances that I have inherited, it is the right choice to make. Successful businesses depend on successful schools. Healthy businesses depend on a healthy NHS. And a strong economy depends on strong public finances. If the party opposite chooses to oppose this choice, then they are choosing more austerity, more chaos, more instability. This is the choice that our country faces too. As I make this choice, I know it is particularly important to protect our smallest companies. So, having heard representations from the Federation of Small Businesses and others, I am today increasing the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500. This means 865,000 employers won't pay any national insurance at all next year. And over 1 million will pay the same or less than they did previously. This will allow a small business to employ the equivalent of 4 full-time workers on the national living wage without paying any national insurance on their wages. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now come to capital gains tax. We need to drive growth, promote entrepreneurship and support wealth creation, while raising the revenue required to fund our public services and restore our public finances. Today, we will increase the lower rate of capital gains tax from 10 to 18% and the higher rate from 20 to 24%, while maintaining the rates of capital gains tax on residential property at 18 and 24% too. This means the UK will still have the lowest capital gains tax rate of any European G7 economy. Alongside these changes to the headline rates of capital gains tax, we are maintaining the lifetime limit for business asset disposal relief at £1 million to encourage entrepreneurs to invest in their businesses. Business asset disposal relief will remain at 10% this year before rising to 14% in April 2025 and to 18% from 2026-27, maintaining a significant gap compared to the higher rate of capital gains tax. Together, the OBR say that these measures will raise £2.5 billion by the end of the forecast. In a sign of this government's commitment to supporting growth and entrepreneurship, we have already extended the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Venture Capital Trust schemes to 2035, and we will continue to work with leading entrepreneurs and venture capital firms to ensure that our policies support a positive environment for entrepreneurship in the UK. Next, inheritance tax. Only 6% of estates will pay inheritance tax this year. I understand the strongly held desire to pass down savings to children and grandchildren, so I am taking a balanced approach in my package today. First, the previous government froze inheritance tax thresholds until 2028. I will extend that freeze for a further 2 years until 2030. That means the first £325,000 of any estate can be inherited tax-free, rising to £500,000 if the estate includes a residence passed to direct descendants, and £1 million when a tax-free allowance is passed to a surviving spouse or civil partner. Second, we will close the loophole created by the previous government, made even bigger when the lifetime allowance was abolished, by bringing inherited pensions into inheritance tax from April 2027. Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms and with three-quarters of claims unaffected by these changes. I can also announce that we will apply a 50% relief in all circumstances on inheritance tax for shares on the alternative investment market and other similar markets, setting the effective rate of tax at 20%. Taken together, these measures raise over £2 billion by the final year of the forecast. Next, I can confirm that the government will renew the tobacco duty escalator for the remainder of this Parliament at RPI plus 2%, increase duty by a further 10% on hand-rolling tobacco this year, introduce a flat rate duty on all vaping liquid from October 2026, alongside an additional one-off increase in tobacco duty to maintain the incentive to give up smoking. And we will increase the soft drinks industry levy to account for inflation since it was introduced, as well as increasing the duty in line with CPI each year going forward. These measures will raise nearly £1 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want to support the take-up of electric vehicles, so I will maintain the incentives for electric vehicles in company car tax from 2028 and increase the differential between fully electric and other vehicles in the first-year rates of vehicle excise duty from April 2025. These measures will raise around £400 million by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me update the House on our plans for air passenger duty. And I can see the right honourable gentleman's ears have pricked up. Air passenger duty has not kept up with inflation in recent years, so we are introducing an adjustment, meaning an increase of no more than £2 for an economy-class short-haul flight. But I am taking a different approach when it comes to private jets. Increasing the rate of air passenger duty by a further 50%. That is equivalent to £450 per passenger for a private jet to, say, California? Madam Deputy Speaker, let us now turn to our high street businesses. I know for them a major source of concern is business rates. From 2026-27, we intend to introduce 2 permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, which make up the backbone of our high streets across the country. And it is our intention that it is paid for by a higher multiplier for the most valuable properties. But the previous government created a cliff edge next year as temporary reliefs end. So I will today provide 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry in 2025-26, up to a cap of £110,000 per business. Alongside this, the small business tax multiplier will be frozen next year. Next, I can confirm that alcohol duty rates on non-draft products will increase in line with RPI from February next year. But nearly 2/3 of alcoholic drinks sold in pubs are served on draft. So today, instead of uprating these products in line with inflation, I am cutting draft duty by 1.7%. Which means a penny off the pints in the pub. Alongside the changes I am making today, I am publishing a corporate tax roadmap, providing the business certainty called for by the CBI, the British Chambers of Commerce and the Institute for Directors. This confirms our commitment to cap the rate of corporation tax at 25%, the lowest in the G7, for the duration of this Parliament, while maintaining full expensing and the £1 million annual investment allowance, and keeping the current rates of research and development relief to drive innovation. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a number of commitments to raise funding for our public services. First, I have always said that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here too. So today I can confirm we will abolish the non-dom tax regime. And we will remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025. We will introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive arrangements for those coming to the UK on a temporary basis, while closing the loopholes in the scheme designed by the party opposite. To further encourage investment into the UK, we will also extend the temporary repatriation relief to 3 years and expand its scope, bringing billions of pounds of new funds into Britain. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility say that this package of measures will raise £12.7 billion over the next 5 years. Next, the fund management industry provides a vital contribution to our economy. But as our manifesto set out, there needs to be a fairer approach to the way that carried interest is taxed. So we will increase the capital gains rates on carried interest to 32% from April 2025. And from April 2026, we will deliver further reform to ensure that the specific rules for carried interest are simpler, fairer and better targeted. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow. This will support over 130,000 additional transactions from people buying their first home or moving home over the next 5 years. Next, we are committed to reform the energy profits levy on oil and gas companies. I can confirm today that we will increase the rate of the levy to 38%, which will now expire in March 2030, and we will remove the 29% investment allowance to ensure that the oil and gas industry can protect jobs and support our energy security. So we will maintain the 100% first-year allowances and the decarbonisation allowances too. Finally, 94% of children in the UK attend state schools. To provide the highest quality of support and teaching that they deserve, we will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. We said in our manifesto that these changes, alongside our measures to tackle tax avoidance, would bring in £8.5 billion in the final year of the forecast. I can confirm today that they will in fact raise over £9 billion to support our public services and restore our public finances. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final decision to take on tax today. The previous government froze income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again. When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the choices I have made to restore economic stability and to protect working people. The next choice I make is to begin to repair our public services. In recent months, we have conducted the first phase of the spending review to set departmental budgets for 2024-25 and 2025-26. And I want to thank my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, for his tireless work with colleagues from across government. Because I have taken difficult decisions on tax today, I am able to provide an injection of immediate funding over the next 2 years to stabilise and to support our public services. The next phase of the spending review will report in late spring, and I have set the overall envelope today. Day-to-day spending from 2024-25 onwards will grow by 1.5% in real terms. And today, departmental spending, including capital spending, will grow by 1.7% in real terms. At the election, we promised there would be no return to austerity. Today, we deliver on that promise. But given the scale of the challenge that we are facing in our public services, that means there will still be difficult choices in the next phase of the spending review. Just as we cannot tax and spend our way to prosperity, nor can we simply spend our way to better public services. So we will deliver a new approach to public service reform, using technology to improve public services and taking a zero-based approach so that taxpayers' money is spent as effectively as possible, and so we focus on delivering our key priorities. In the first phase of the spending review, I have prioritised day-to-day funding to deliver on our manifesto commitments. I want every child to have the very best start in life, and the best possible start to the school day too. And I know my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, shares my ambition. So I am today tripling investment in breakfast clubs to fund them in thousands of schools. I am increasing the core schools budget by £2.3 billion next year to support our pledge to hire thousands more teachers into key subjects. So that our young people can develop the skills that they need for the future, I am providing an additional £300 million for further education. And finally, this government is committed to reforming special educational needs provision to improve outcomes for our most vulnerable children and to ensure that the system is financially sustainable. To support that work, I am today providing a £1 billion uplift in funding, a 6% real terms increase from this year. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe, and we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year. And as set out in our manifesto, we will set a path to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence at a future fiscal event. Today, I am announcing a total increase to the Ministry of Defence's budget of £2.9 billion next year, ensuring that the UK comfortably exceeds our NATO commitments and providing guaranteed military support to Ukraine of £3 billion per year for as long as it takes. Last week, alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, I announced in addition to this further support to Ukraine on top of our NATO commitment through our £2.26 billion contribution to the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Agreement, repaid using profits from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. And as we approach Remembrance Sunday, it is vital that we take time to remember those who have served our country so bravely. So I am today announcing funding to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ Day next year, to honour those who have served at home and abroad. We must also remember those who experienced the atrocities of the Nazi regime firsthand. I would like to pay tribute to Lily Ebert, the Holocaust survivor and educator who passed away aged 100 earlier this month. I am today committing a further £2 million to Holocaust education next year, so that charities like the Holocaust Educational Trust can continue their work to ensure that these vital testimonies are not lost and are preserved for the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, to repair our public services, we also need to work alongside our mayors and local leaders. We will deliver a significant real terms funding increase for local governments next year, including £1.3 billion of additional grant funding to deliver essential services, with at least £600 million in grant funding for social care and £230 million to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. We are today confirming that Greater Manchester and the West Midlands will be the first mayoral authorities to receive integrated settlements from next year, giving mayors meaningful control of the funding for their local areas. And to support our high streets, we are taking action to deal with the sharp rise in shoplifting that we have seen in recent years. We will scrap the effective immunity for low-value shoplifting introduced by the party opposites. And having listened closely to organisations like the British Retail Consortium and the trade union USDOR, I am providing additional funding to crack down on the organised gangs which target retailers and to provide more training to our police officers and retailers to stop shoplifting in its tracks. Finally, I am today providing funding to support public services and drive growth across Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Having discussed the matter with the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, and my honourable friends for Llanelli and Pontypridd, I am today providing £25 million to the Welsh Government next year for the maintenance of coal tips to ensure that we keep our communities safe. And to support growth, including in our rural areas, we will proceed with city and growth deals in Northern Ireland, in Causeway Coast and Glens, and the Mid-South West. And we will drive growth in Scotland, a key priority for Scottish Labour and our leader, Anna Sawar, including with a city and growth deal in Argyll and Bute. This budget provides the devolved governments with the largest real terms funding settlements since devolution, delivering an additional £3.4 billion to the Scottish Government through the Barnett formula. Funding which must now be used effectively in Scotland to deliver the public services that the people of Scotland deserve. This budget also provides £1.7 billion to the Welsh Government and £1.5 billion to the Northern Ireland Executive in 2025-26. I said that there would be no return to austerity, and that is the choice that I have made today. Madam Deputy Speaker, to rebuild our country, we need to increase investment. The UK lags behind every other G7 country when it comes to business investment as a share of our economy. That matters. It means the UK has fallen behind in the race for new jobs, new industries and new technology. By restoring economic stability and by establishing the National Wealth Fund to catalyse private funding, we have begun to create the conditions that businesses need to invest. But there is also a significant role for public investment. For too long, we have seen Conservative Chancellors cut investment and raid capital budgets to plug gaps in day-to-day spending. The result is clear for all to see. Hospitals without the equipment they need. School buildings not fit for our children. A desperate lack of affordable housing. Economic growth held back at every turn. Under the plans I inherited, public investment was set to fall from 2.5% to 1.7% of GDP. But in Washington last week, the International Monetary Fund were clear. More public investment is badly needed in the UK. So having listened to the case made by the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, former Treasury Minister Jim O'Neill, and the former Cabinet Secretary Gus O'Donnell, among others, I am confirming our investment rule. As set out in our manifesto, we will target debt falling as a share of the economy. Debt will be defined as public sector net financial liabilities, or net financial debt for short, a metric that has been measured by the Office for National Statistics since 2016 and forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility since that date too. Net financial debt recognises that government investment delivers returns for taxpayers. By counting not just the liabilities on a government's balance sheet, but the financial assets too. This means that we count the benefits of that investment, not just the costs. And we free up our institutions to invest, just as they do in Germany, France and Japan. Like our stability rule, our investment rule will apply in 2029-2030, until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From that point onwards, net financial debt will fall in the third year of every forecast. Today, the OBR say that we are already meeting our target 2 years early. with net financial debt falling by 2027-28, with £15.7 billion of headroom in the final year. So that we drive the right incentives in government investments, we will introduce 4 key guardrails to ensure capital spending is good value for money and drives growth in our economy. First, our portfolio of new financial investments will be delivered by expert bodies like the National Wealth Fund, which must, by default, earn a rate of return at least as large as that on gilts. Second, we will strengthen the role of institutions to improve infrastructure delivery. Third, we will improve certainty, setting capital budgets for 5 years and extending them at every spending review every 2 years. Finally, we will ensure that there is greater transparency for capital spending, with robust annual reporting of financial investments based on accounts audited by the National Audit Office and made available to the Office for Budget Responsibility at every forecast. Taken together with our stability rule, these fiscal rules will ensure that our public finances are on a firm footing, while enabling us to invest prudently alongside business. The capital plans that I now set out to drive growth across our country and repair the fabric of our nation are only possible because of our investment rule. Let me set out those investment plans. Today, we are confirming our plans to capitalise the National Wealth Fund to invest in the industries of the future, from gigafactories to ports to green hydrogen. Building on these investments, my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is driving forward our modern industrial strategy. Working with businesses and organisations like Make UK to set out the sectors with the biggest growth potential. Today, we are confirming multi-year funding commitments for these areas of our economy, including nearly £1 billion for the aerospace sector to fund vital research and development, building on our industry in the East Midlands, the South West and in Scotland. Over £2 billion for the automotive sector to support our electric vehicle industry and develop our manufacturing base, building on our strengths in the North East and the West Midlands. And up to £520 million for a new life sciences innovative manufacturing fund. For our world-leading creative industries, we will legislate to provide additional tax relief for visual effect costs in TV and film. And we are providing £25 million for the North East Combined Authority, which they plan to use to remediate the Crown Works studio site in Sunderland, creating 8,000 new jobs. To unlock these growth industries of the future, we will protect government investment in research and development with more than £20 billion worth of funding. This includes at least £6.1 billion to protect core research funding for areas like engineering, biotechnology and medical science. Through Research England, other research councils and the national academies. We will extend the Innovation Accelerators programme in Glasgow, in Manchester and in the West Midlands. And with over £500 million of funding next year, my right honourable friend, the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretary, will continue to drive progress in improving reliable, fast broadband and mobile coverage across our country, including in rural areas. We committed in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is driving that work forward across government. Today, I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year. We will increase the Affordable Homes programme to £3.1 billion, delivering thousands of new homes. We will provide £3 billion worth of support in guarantees to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders. And we will provide investment to renovate sites across our country, including at Liverpool Central Docks, where we will deliver 2,000 new homes, and funding to help Cambridge realise its full growth potential. Alongside this investment, we will put the right policies in place to increase the supply of affordable housing. Having heard representations from local authorities, social housing providers and from Shelter, I can today confirm that the Government will reduce right-to-buy discounts and local authorities will be able to retain the full receipts from any sales of social housing so that we can reinvest them back into the housing stock and into new supply. By doing this, we will give more people a safe, secure and affordable place to live. We will provide stability to social housing providers with a social housing rent settlement of CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to hire hundreds of new planning officers to get Britain building again. We will also make progress on our commitment to accelerate the remediation of homes following the findings of the Grenfell inquiry, with £1 billion of investment to remove dangerous cladding next year. The last government made a number of promises on transport, but it failed to fund them. Working with my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, I am changing that. We are today securing the delivery of the TransPennine upgrade to connect York, Leeds, Huddersfield and Manchester. Delivering fully electric local and regional services between Manchester and Staley Bridge by the end of this year. With a further electrification of services between Church Fenton and York by 2026. To help grow our economy across the north of England with faster and more reliable services. We will deliver East-West Rail to drive growth between Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge, with the first services running between Oxford, Bletchley and Milton Keynes next year, and trains between Oxford and Bedford running from 2030. We are delivering railway schemes which improve journeys for people across our country, including upgrades at Bradford Forster Square Station, improving capacity at Manchester Victoria and electrifying the Wigan to Bolton line. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, has also set out a plan for how to get a grip of HS2. Today, we are securing delivery of the project between Old Oak Common and Birmingham, and we are committing the funding required to begin tunnelling work to London Euston Station. This will catalyse private investment into the local area, delivering jobs and growth. I am also funding significant improvements to our roads network. For too long, potholes have been an all too visible reminder of our failure to invest as a nation. Today, that changes. With £500 million increase in road maintenance budgets next year, more than delivering on our manifesto commitment to fix an additional 1 million potholes each year. We will provide over £650 million of local transport funding to improve connections across our country, in towns like Crewe and Grimsby, and in our villages and rural areas from Cornwall to Cumbria. And while the previous government's policy was for the bus fare cap to end this December, we understand how important bus services are for our communities. And so we will extend the cap for a further year, setting it at £3 until December 2025. Finally, we will deliver £1.3 billion of funding to improve connectivity in our city regions, funding projects like the Brierley Hill Metro extension in the West Midlands, the renewal of Sheffield Supertram, and the West Yorkshire Mass Transit, including in Bradford and Leeds. Madam Deputy Speaker, to bring new jobs to Britain and to drive growth across our country, we are delivering our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, led by my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary. Earlier this month, we announced a significant multi-year investment between government and business into carbon capture and storage, creating 4,000 jobs across Merseyside and Teesside. Today, I am providing funding for 11 new green hydrogen projects across England, Scotland and Wales. They will be amongst the first commercial-scale projects anywhere in the world, including in Bridgend, East Renfrewshire and Barrow-in-Furness. We are kick-starting the Warm Homes Plan by confirming an initial £3.4 billion over the next 3 years to transform 350,000 homes, including 250,000 low-income and social homes. And we will establish GB Energy, providing funding next year to set up GB Energy at its new home in Aberdeen. Overall, we will invest an additional £100 billion over the next 5 years in capital spending, only possible because of our investment rule. The OBR say today that this investment will drive growth across our country in the next 5 years and, in the longer term, increase GDP by up to 1.4%. It will crowd in private investment, meaning more jobs and more opportunities in every corner of the UK. That is the choice that I have made, to invest in our country and to grow our economy. Today, I am setting out 2 final areas in which investment is so badly needed to repair the fabric of our nation. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, the member for Lewisham West and East Dulwich and I joined the Labour Party because of the condition of our schools in the 1980s and the 1990s under Conservative governments. When we were at secondary school, my sixth form was a couple of prefab huts in the playground. My school, like so many others, was rebuilt by the last Labour government. But today, after 14 years of Tory government, progress has gone backwards. School roofs are crumbling and millions of children are facing the same backdrop as I did. I will be the Chancellor that changes that. So today, I am providing £6.7 billion of capital investment to the Department for Education next year, a 19% real terms increase on this year. That includes £1.4 billion to rebuild over 500 schools in the greatest need, including St Helens Primary School in Hartlepool and Mercia Academy in Derby, and so many more across our country. And we will provide £2.1 billion more to improve school maintenance, £300 million more than this year, ensuring that all our children can learn somewhere safe, including dealing with RAC-affected schools in the constituencies of my right honourable friends for Watford, Stourbridge, Hyndburn and beyond. Alongside investment in new teachers and funding through thousands of new breakfast clubs, this government is giving our children and young people the opportunities that they deserve. Madam Deputy Speaker, I come to our most cherished public service of all, our NHS. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is beginning to repair the damage of the last 14 years. In our first week in office, he commissioned an independent report into the state of our health service by Lord Darcy. Its conclusions were damning. While our NHS staff do a remarkable job, and we thank them for it, it is clear that in so many areas we are moving in the wrong direction. 100,000 infants waited over 6 hours in A&E last year. 350,000 people are waiting a year for mental health support. Cancer deaths here higher than in other countries. It is simply unforgivable. In the spring, we will publish a 10-year plan for the NHS to deliver a shift from hospital to community, from analogue to digital, and from sickness to prevention. Today, we are announcing a down payment on that plan to enable the NHS to deliver 2% productivity growth next year. These reforms are vital, but we should be honest. The state of the NHS that we have inherited after, and I quote Lord Darcy, the most austere decade since the NHS was founded, means that reform must come alongside investment. So today, because of the difficult decisions that I have taken on tax, welfare and spending, I can announce that I am providing a £22.6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget and a £3.1 billion increase in the capital budget over this year and next. This is the largest real terms growth in day-to-day NHS spending outside of COVID since 2010. Let me set out what this funding is delivering. Many NHS buildings have been left in a state of disrepair. So we will provide £1 billion of health capital investment next year to address the backlog of repairs and upgrades across our NHS. To increase capacity for tens of thousands more procedures next year, we will provide a further £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals across our country, new capacity for over 1 million additional diagnostic tests, and new surgical hubs and diagnostic centres, so that people waiting for their treatment can get it as quickly as possible. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out further details of his review into the new hospital programme in the coming weeks and publishing in the new year. But I can tell the House today that work will continue at pace to deliver those 7 hospitals affected by the RAC crisis, including West Suffolk Hospital in Bury St Edmunds and Leighton Hospital in Crewe. And finally, because of this record injection of funding, because of the thousands of additional beds that we have secured, and because of the reforms that we are delivering in our NHS, we can now begin to bring waiting lists down more quickly and move towards our target for waiting times to be no longer than 18 weeks. By delivering on our manifesto commitment for 40,000 extra hospital appointments a week, that is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, the choices I have made today are the right choices for our country. To restore stability to our public finances, to protect working people, to fix our NHS, and to rebuild Britain. That doesn't mean these choices are easy, but they are responsible. If the party opposite disagrees with the choices that I have made, then they must answer. What choices would they make? Would they again choose the path of irresponsibility, the path taken by Liz Truss, and ignore the problems in our public finances altogether? If that is their choice, they should say so. But let me be clear. If they disagree with my choices on tax, then they would not be able to protect working people. If they disagree with our plans to fund public services, then they would have to cut schools and hospitals. And if they disagree with our investment rule, then they would have to delay or cancel thousands of projects which drive growth across our country. This is a moment of fundamental choice for Britain. I have made my choices, the responsible choices, to restore stability to our country, to protect working people. More teachers in our schools, more appointments in our NHS, more homes being built, fixing the foundations of our economy, investing in our future, delivering change, rebuilding Britain. We on these benches commend those choices, and I commend this statement to the House.
Number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally?
I beg to move.
The question is that pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Value added tax, private school fees, motion number 34. Stamp duty, land tax, additional dwellings, purchases before the 1st of April 2025, motion number 35. Stamp duty, land tax, purchases by companies, motion number 37. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 46. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Shh. We now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Wednesday, the 6th of November. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
I beg to move.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 25-26, and it is declared that this is expedient in the public interest, that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968. I now call the Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the day that he took office, the Prime Minister said that he wanted to restore trust to British politics with action, not words. Well, today, his actions speak for themselves, with a budget that contains broken promise after broken promise, and reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people. Time and again, we Conservatives warned Labour would tax, borrow and spend far beyond what they were telling the country. And time and again, they denied they had such plans. But today, the truth has come out. Proof that they planned to do this all along. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget sees the fiscal rules fiddled, borrowing increased by billions of pounds, inflation-busting handouts for the trade unions, Britain's poorest pensioners, Britain's poorest...
Order! Just as we respected the Chancellor and heard her speak, we will hear the Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Britain's poorest pensioners squeezed, welfare spending out of control, and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. pensions tax up. They have fiddled the figures. They don't like it, Mr. Speaker. They don't like it, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Order. The public will also want to hear what the Leader of the Opposition has to say. And shouting whilst I can see you will mean that you will not be called to speak later on. Simmer.
They don't like it, but this is the truth. They have fiddled the figures. They have raised tax to record levels. They have broken their promises, and it is the working people of this country that are going to pay the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have tried to say that they had no choice. But be in no doubt, their misleading claims about the state of the economy are nothing but a cynical political device. Today's situation is a world away from the genuinely bleak legacy that we Conservatives inherited from the last Labour government. Borrowing. The Chancellor forgot to point out, borrowing £1 in every 4 that they spent. Debt rising every year and unemployment at 8%. Now, I understand the Chancellor's shameless political motivations, why it suits her to cook up a false justification for her agenda. But today, the OBR has, in fact, declined to back up her claims of a fictional £22 billion black hole. It actually appears nowhere in their report, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is deeply, deeply disappointing that she has sought to politicise the independent OBR that should be above party politics. But as she now knows, her playing politics has done real damage to our economy. She talked about being a Bank of England economist. Well, as the Bank of England's former chief economist has said, Labour's approach has generated fear and foreboding and uncertainty amongst consumers, businesses and investors. The rhetoric of this Chancellor and this Prime Minister damaging the British economy for political purposes. Now, you only need to look at the facts to see that the Chancellor's claims about her economic inheritance are nonsense. Labour inherited an economy with inflation back at its 2% target, mortgage rates being cut and unemployment low. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we left office, the United Kingdom was the fastest growing advanced economy in the world. And when it comes to the public finances, not once has the Chancellor acknowledged that we took the right decision to spend £500 billion to protect the British people from the impact of COVID and Putin's war. And let me remind you, not only did the party opposite support all those interventions, they wanted us to go even further, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when I made the tough choices to fix the public finances afterwards, the Prime Minister and Chancellor opportunistically opposed me every step of the way. So I will take no lectures from those two about difficult decisions. But because of those decisions that we made, the Chancellor inherited lower borrowing than France, America, Italy and Japan, and the second lowest debt in the entire G7. So any which way you look at it, Labour's claims about their inheritance are purely ludicrous. These are her choices, so stop blaming everyone else and take responsibility for them. Now, let me turn to the substance of those choices. During the election, the Chancellor repeatedly promised that her plans were fully funded. Only a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals they have not been straight with the British people.
Oh, come on.
I can see you, even when you're hiding behind another colleague.
No.
Yelling across the chamber is not on. The public and our constituents are watching. I know emotions are high, and I expect some noise, but have the confidence to shout closer, and I will definitely call you out. Leader of the Opposition.
A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals that they haven't been straight with the British people. Because today, the Chancellor has launched an enormous borrowing spree, saddling our children and grandchildren with billions upon billions pounds more debt, pushing up interest rates, leaving our economy more exposed to future shocks, and leading the OBR today to now forecast higher inflation in every year of the forecast. And her decision to let borrowing rip make a total nonsense of her claims on the state of the public finances. Because if they truly were in such a dire strait, as she has said, what we should have seen today is a significant reduction in borrowing to repair them, not the splurge that she's just unleashed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead, what we see today, borrowing higher in every year of the forecast, debt higher in every year of the forecast. Now she has tried to cover up that splurge by fiddling the fiscal rules. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the new measure will not actually even be a constraint on the amount she can borrow. And it is hard to escape the suspicion, they say, that the government is attracted to this change by the fact that it would allow for significantly more borrowing without any need for tough choices elsewhere. Fiscal fiddling is what they have called it. And the Chancellor herself actually agrees, because she specifically told the British people she wouldn't change the debt target. Because, and I quote, she said, "I'm not going to fiddle the figures to get better results." But that is exactly what she has done. She has gone back on her word and fiddled the figures so that she can borrow billions more. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people will pay the price. Now, the reason the Chancellor has increased borrowing and increased taxes is because she has totally failed to grip public spending. First, she has no meaningful plan. First, she has no meaningful plan to deliver the £20 billion worth of savings available if the public sector returned simply to its pre-pandemic levels of productivity. Instead, one of the first things the Chancellor did was to hand out inflation-busting pay rises to the unions without getting any productivity-enhancing reforms in return. The Chancellor also scrapped her predecessor's plan to get the civil service back to its pre-pandemic numbers. She doesn't seem to think that the civil service can be reduced by a single person. And the Chancellor has no plan to control welfare spending. Yet if we simply got working-age welfare spending on people with a disability or health condition back to pre-COVID levels, that would free up £30 billion worth of savings. So whether it is scrapping our plans to shrink the civil service or their failure to control welfare spending, this is not her inheritance, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are her choices. And the result, higher spending, higher borrowing, higher taxes. It's broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn next to growth and remind the Prime Minister and Chancellor that they did in fact inherit the fastest growing economy in the G7, and that That is testament to the last government boosting investment by introducing full expensing, increasing the labour supply by expanding childcare, reforming welfare and cutting tax on work. All decisions the OBR said would increase growth. Now, the Chancellor has said that growing the economy is the government's #1 priority. The Prime Minister even said that higher growth would come very quickly. Well, to be fair, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have had a rapid impact on growth. As their plans for the economy became clear, survey after survey showed business confidence plummeting. And no wonder. The government's own assessment says its French-style labour laws will impose a £5 billion... Well, they will be explaining it to the businesses in their constituency that their labour laws, by their own assessment, will impose a £5 billion direct cost on business, disproportionately hitting smaller businesses. And as business group after business group has pointed out, the tax rises on jobs and enterprise in today's budget will hobble growth. A poll tax on business is what they've called it. But despite these record-breaking tax rises, despite fiddling the figures, despite letting borrowing soar, today the OBR has forecast growth is going to be lower under this government than it was forecast to be under the Conservatives. That's the change they have brought. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is what happens when the Labour Party is led by people who have no experience of business and enterprise. Relentlessly talking down our economy, delivering a tidal wave of anti-business regulations, destroying our flexible labour market and raising taxes to the highest level in our country's history. It's the classic Labour agenda: higher taxes, higher borrowing, no plan for growth, and working people paying the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, during the election campaign, the Prime Minister specifically said there would be no tax surprises under Labour. The Chancellor went even further, saying she wanted to bring taxes down. Each time they made these promises, we warned they were not telling the truth. And today, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have done what they were always planning to do, but chose to keep hidden from the British people. Far from reducing taxes as a result of today's budget, never in the history of our country will taxes be higher than they are under this Labour government. Now, they specifically promised that they wouldn't raise tax on working people. The Chancellor said Labour will not put up income tax, national insurance or VAT. Just this month, the Prime Minister gave, and I quote, an absolute commitment to not raising tax on working people. So what does today's budget do? It raises tax on working people by increasing national insurance and breaking Labour's promise. As the Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies have said, this is a straightforward breach of their manifesto. Because, as the OBR have made clear, this tax rise is passed through entirely to working people. Even since she started speaking, the IFS have already confirmed that the vast majority of this tax increase will hit working people through lower pay. But you don't need to take it from the IFS or even the OBR. You can take it from the Chancellor herself. She has previously described her tax rise as a jobs tax, which takes money out of people's pockets. And not only that, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor also said the problem with national insurance is that it is a tax purely on people who go to work and those who employ them. So far from protecting working people, she is literally raising the only major tax that exclusively hits working people. But it doesn't stop there. Businesses on the British high street, your taxes are going up. Businesses investing in British energy, your taxes are going up. The small business owner looking to reap the rewards of years spent growing a business and creating jobs, your taxes are going up. The young couple saving to buy their first home, your taxes are going up. The family...
Mr. Streeting, you promised me this morning. Let's try and keep our promises.
Well, I'm sure the front bench will explaining to the young couple and their constituency saving to buy their first home that their taxes are going up. To the family wanting to pass on their farm or their business to their children, your taxes are going up. The parents sacrificing to give their kids the best start in life, your taxes are going up. They're taxing your job. They're taxing your business, they're taxing your home, they're taxing your savings. I said it during the election campaign. You name it, they will tax it, and that is exactly what they have done. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, from the final time, from this dispatch box, let me deliver.
Well, he's wiped the floor with Rachel.
Let me deliver some basic truths. Government can foster growth, but it can't magically conjure it up. We need businesses, workers, investors and entrepreneurs to all back this country and build our economy. It doesn't matter whether your income comes in a pay packet from investments, in dividends or profits. It is a poor politics that is so focused on what people receive that it fails to see that what matters is what people put in. Yeah. The only way to grow the economy and to create wealth is for people to put in more. So when you create a negative environment for business, when you undermine confidence in our country, when you vilify and penalise people for doing exactly what we need them to do, which is to invest, take risks and work hard, you don't create growth, you hold back growth. Yeah. And more than that, the promise of growth today does not pay the bills. The growth tomorrow does not pay the bills today. This is not the first government to peddle the borrow to grow myth. But time and again, we have seen the same ending. Not higher growth, but higher debt, higher inflation and higher taxes. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, whatever you think about the economic arguments around today's budget, there is a more fundamental point that I want to conclude with. The Prime Minister has talked relentlessly about trust. Yet today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party... Today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party did not tell the truth. They said they wouldn't fiddle the figures. They have. They said they wouldn't increase borrowing. They have. They said they wouldn't raise taxes on working people. They have. Broken promise after broken promise, and it is the working people of this country that will pay the price.
Order. Order. I call the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
I'm just getting ready to listen.
If it's a genuine, relevant point of order.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if you could give me some advice, because I'm concerned the Chancellor may have inadvertently failed to declare an interest. She spoke a lot about working people during her speech. Is she a working person, and should she declare that? Or maybe she isn't.
That was not a relevant point of order, and it will be noted in case the gentleman wishes to bring forward any further points of order. Now we wait to hear the Treasury Select Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And before I start, in addition to my register of interest, I need to draw the House's attention that I have a family member who works for Allied Irish Bank. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been looking forward to today. I'm honoured to have been chosen by this House across party to chair the Treasury Select Committee. And to be the first Labour chair of Treasury Select Committee to welcome the budget of a Labour government. And our first female Labour Chancellor. And to do this after a 14 years long wait, I thought would be an exciting moment. And in a moment of sentimentality, realising that for the second time today I would be following the Right Honourable Member for Richmond speaking in this House, I was going to reflect on the interesting constitutional position that in my former role as Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, there was a common ground at times with the Prime Minister of the day. And in private, when I had cause to meet the Right Honourable Gentleman, he was courteous, thoughtful, respectful, had the national interest at heart, and on constitutional matters was in very much the same place as me. So I was very disappointed today to hear the cheek of the Right Honourable Gentleman to stand up and have the chutzpah to talk about fear and foreboding and uncertainty when it was the 2022 mini-budget that plunged this country into crisis, put up the mortgage rates of our constituents and is still leaving people living in great hardship. And it was under his watch as Chancellor when he did some things in COVID that we would all recognise need to be done, and we did at the time. But it was the bounce-back loans that were on his watch that led to a significant amount of the fraud as a result of COVID. And now, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has stood up, and what has happened? The FTSE is up. It may have gone up more since I stood up. 1.6 percentage points, unless anyone can update me. And the OBR has said this will add growth to the economy. And he also attacked the Chancellor on fiscal rules. But let's be clear, fiscal rules are not a new thing. But since 2011, there have been 7 fiscal mandates, 5 supplementary debt targets, 2 supplementary borrowing targets, and an investment limit. And the rules set in 2011 lasted 3 years. But in the last 3 years, we've had 3 different fiscal mandates, 2 different supplementary debt caps, and a supplementary borrowing target. So fiscal rules, and I think the Chancellor knows when she's in front of us as Chancellor and the Treasury Select Committee, we may be challenging her and asking her about her fiscal rules, but I have certainty, we all have certainty, that the Chancellor will be in her post for long enough to stick to the fiscal rules she said. They will have a longevity beyond the previous government. And I really do welcome this budget, and particularly want to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the UK's first woman Chancellor. Standing at that dispatch box, another glass ceiling shattered. She should be proud. We are proud, and I congratulate her on that achievement. And it is my first budget as Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and I've spent 13 years in total, 9 years as Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, examining public spending in enormous detail. And I know, like me, the Chancellor was a scrutineer. She chaired a Select Committee, and she understands the importance of that scrutiny. And I'm very clear, the Treasury Select Committee won't be giving the Chancellor an easy ride, because she's a highly capable woman who can come and explain all her decisions to us. And she knows it's our job to rigorously examine the detail of the budget next Wednesday when she appears in front of us. And she will be getting a bit of what she dished out as Chair. And I know she would expect nothing less than robust challenge. And if she weren't up to it, then she wouldn't be in her post now. But I have to add a note, I have to say. I am disappointed that so much of this budget was revealed before today. This is not normal practice, and I hope going forward that the courtesy to this House and to the Treasury Select Committee means that constituents and MPs representing them will be the first to know about major issues, and that will, from now onwards, be a hallmark of Treasury engagement. So, this budget is a very exciting time, and it is a difficult one, though, for the Chancellor. She has made very clear that she would deliver certainty, and she has inherited one hell of a mess. After a tumultuous period of Brexit, the pandemic, the mini-budget, 14 years of austerity, delayed and failed decisions repeatedly, particularly on capital spending. We've had 3 carbon capture and storage projects that have never come to fruition. The saga and the cost of stop and start on HS2. 700,000 pupils in schools not fit for purpose. Public services on their knees. Public nectar set at its highest rates since the Second World War. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and can I congratulate her on her election unopposed to chair the wonderful Treasury Select Committee? Does she share my concern that the individual who has been appointed to the Office for Value for Money was previously on the board of HS2?
Well, as the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady knows, and she is a member, of course, of the Treasury Select Committee, and welcome the former chair being a member. That's great value to the committee. We will have the opportunity to raise questions with the Chancellor at next week's hearing, and I'm sure she's now forewarned that you may be asking her about this issue. But it is important that we recognise good people who provide support in the public sector to watch our public finances. And I always take people on good faith unless I have a reason not to do so. So we have opportunity to explore that elsewhere. The public sector net debt is at its highest since the Second World War. The taxes as a share of GDP are higher than at any time since World War II. And before the election, my honourable friend was tough on spending commitments. Sometimes there would be a bit of moaning in the tea room. I don't want to tell her tales out of school. But people would be, shadow ministers were dismayed because they couldn't spend everything that they were promised, everything they wanted to. But as chair of the Public Accounts Committee at the time, I knew what she was talking about, and I knew what was coming wasn't going to be very pretty. So I really welcome some of the steps that she's announced today. I haven't had a chance, of course, to look in the Red Book or at the detail, but the multi-year funding settlements that she's put in place are a really great opportunity to give certainty to business and investors in our country. Finally nailing, hopefully, the issue of HS2, which has cost the taxpayer a fortune, and we need to get on with that in order to make sure that we are delivering investment for our country. Moving on cladding, and we'll look forward to seeing the detail of that, but it's a big issue in my constituency, particularly where many people who have lives and hold as a result. And the money for affordable homes is incredibly vital for those who are living in difficult situations. And she's absolutely right to have finally funded the compensation schemes for infected blood and the postmasters and postmistresses. When the state makes an error, the state needs to correct it, and that should never be a party political football. So she's had to make tough choices, and she's set out in clarity with her fiscal rules and to provide clarity to the markets and a long-term trajectory for investment and growth. And net financial debt was something that we, of course, on the Treasury Committee will watch closely to see how the benefit is measured. And it's important, though, for taxpayers and the market that we do that. And she will be more aware than anyone about the impact on the market if she doesn't manage this very carefully. But international investors also may use the existing or the pre-existing debt model. So I'd be interested to talk to her when she comes in front of us about how she sees this playing in the international arena. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank you very much, the Honourable Lady, for giving way, and I have enormous respect for her both in her previous role and now in her really important role as the chair of the Treasury Select Committee. And I know she's said that already she's got the Chancellor coming to see her Select Committee very shortly. So I wonder if on my behalf she could put a question to the Chancellor. I think we all know that we can learn the previous lessons of previous budgets, the law of unintended consequences. And on this budget, the thing that concerns me most is the combination of raising employers' national insurance, cutting the threshold at which they start paying it, and raising the minimum wages. The business that will most be impacted by those are businesses that employ a lot of people on low wages, businesses like care homes and childcare settings. So I wonder if she could I wonder if she could ask the Chancellor, will there be special support for them? Because otherwise those will be money that will be passed on.
Meg Hillier.
The Honourable Lady is very experienced in this House, and she's made her point, and she'll have obviously the opportunity to speak in this budget debate, no doubt. And there will be plenty of opportunity across the committee corridor, and I welcome her as a fellow chair. Already, committee chairs are planning how we will work together in order to make sure that we hold the government to account, whichever party we represent. And the fiscal rules, of course, are designed to provide that fiscal certainty and predictability, and bring a sense of discipline to the public finances and to reassure the market, as I've mentioned. So I welcome that stability, as no doubt will the markets, as the FTSE increase suggests. And the committee will be watching how much she invests of the headroom that she has secured under this new rule. Because we do need to see the growth that she set out as her goal. This must be sustainable, so needs to be productivity growth. And there's no single solution, but the Resolution Foundation, in one analysis, found that a 1% increase in capital stock increased productivity by 0.4%. So we will look closely at this and at the spending review in 2025. On tax, the increase in employers' national insurance to 15% is an understandable measure, always a challenge about where to find money in these difficult fiscal circumstances, but this brings money into the Exchequer at a faster pace than some of the other issues that were raised in the media. It was interesting. I have a wide approach, Madam Deputy Speaker, to reading about things. If you read the Daily Telegraph, you'd think that the world was going to hell in a handcart. And if you read more measured commentary, I think the Chancellor will be judged well on what she's achieved today. So there are obviously, exactly as the Right Honourable Lady opposite has raised, there are issues about how these interact. And we will, of course, as a Treasury Select Committee, be examining those along with sister committees and make sure that I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Decent and patient in doing so. Can I just ask her, through her committee, whether she would look very carefully about the Chancellor's proposals on agricultural property relief and the damage that it's very likely to do to small family farms, farm-owned farms, and especially to tenants who are likely to be evicted as a consequence of this? Will she look at what this might do, not just for basic justice, but for food security in this country?
Well said.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I was the sort of person to get big-headed at the number of members who are asking me to do things that probably aren't in my remit, I could extend the remit of the Treasury Select Committee and its power infinitely, it seems. Of course, it is his own Right Honourable friend, the member for Shetland, who chairs the EFRA Select Committee. And as I say, we're planning as chairs to make sure we work closely together on issues where there is an overlap of interest, and we will be picking up on all of these issues. But I have to say, we have a government has promised openness and transparency and accountability. And I take my front bench at their word on that. And I'm sure that the Chancellor and her ministers themselves will be available to talk to people and explain the issues of concern that many members may have about very specific elements of the budget. I welcome some of the other measures that have been announced. The increase in the national living wage will have a huge difference for so many of my constituents and others who work hard. And they are certainly not shirkers, as some might call them on the other side, but they can barely make ends meet. In my constituency, there are many people who work 4 days a week because they earn enough to be able to do that. Others who have 4 jobs over 7 days just to hold body and soul together. So I welcome that and the removal of the age discrimination. And the devolution model, it makes so much sense in so many ways. On the Public Accounts Committee, we repeatedly looked at the challenge of pots of funds that had to be bid for, and it's something that's costly, it's time-consuming, and we need to trust our elected mayors to make decisions for their area, and this shows the direction of trust that this government hopefully will continue to go down. Before the last general election, Madam Deputy Speaker, I listed what I called the big nasties. This was just some of the additional spending that needed to take place. Things that have been left sometimes by the last government, some by successive governments, sadly. Such issues as the RAC failure in schools, so I welcome the move to deal with that finally. The long waiting lists in the NHS, overcrowded prisons. What you see, I think, in the Red Book, it looks like the Justice Department has had an uplift. It's difficult to make full judgment on that in the few minutes I've had to glimpse through it. But there are other issues like the Animal Health Centre in Weybridge and Porton Down which need investment. These are risky things not to invest in. So there's going to be a challenge in public spending with the increase. And although the increase is welcome, this will require the growth that the Chancellor has called for and is trying to achieve to really deliver in order to make sure that we do see the spending that we need. Because even with the uplift that she's highlighted, the 1.5% from next year in day-to-day spending, this is a very tight financial situation for all government departments. But the boost to the Department of Health is staggering and welcome. And I'm sure that between the Public Accounts Committee, the Treasury Select Committee and the Health Select Committee, we will be holding the Health Secretary to account for his promises on making sure that that is spent well and delivers permanent and lasting change. And the capital investment is so desperately necessary. It is not that long ago the last government raided capital budgets for day-to-day spending in the NHS. That cannot be allowed to continue. And the investment in defence, absolutely necessary. There is a huge gap in the defence equipment plan, which I know my right honourable friend is all over, and she is right to increase that. And I look forward to that path to 2.5% of GDP on defence. Never again should we be going below that. Local government, although it has a boost, is going to be very squeezed, and we will be working again with sister committees to look at that. The Chancellor has also promised, Madam Deputy Speaker, to close the tax gap and reduce it. This is very bold and difficult to deliver. So again, the committee will be looking closely at how this is dealt with, as well as the recovery of fraud monies, which is can be very challenging to deliver in any particular timescale. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a privilege to be here as a... I'll give way to the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee.
New Chair of the Select Committee, and I congratulate her on her new role. There was one very welcome bit in the budget today, and that was the funding of the infected blood schemes and the Post Office Horizon schemes. That is welcome, but would she join me in urging the Chancellor to make sure that these amounts are quickly paid out so that those victims, we're hearing on them almost every day on the media, are rapidly compensated and they can get their lives back to normal?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems when you become Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, there's something that we share in common, and one is that we hear good promises made by governments of different colours that don't always deliver as they should. And he is absolutely right. In fact, the National Audit Office, at my request, pulled together a document looking at compensation schemes, because they are often differently put together, although these have now been set, and they're often not delivering as well as others. We think of Windrush as well in that mix. So it is important, and I'm sure the Chancellor, he may be offering his services to the Chancellor to make sure that this money gets out of the door, and of course his committee will be examining these programmes as time goes on. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to respond to the Chancellor today, to welcome a Labour Chancellor to her place. I wish her well, I wish the Labour government well, of course, and I want to see these results on the ground in my constituency. But as I say, without fear or favour, the Chancellor will appear in front of us over the coming years, and we will be challenging her and her ministers to make sure they stick to the promises that she's laid out today. Thank you.
We now come to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and I wish her all the best in her new role, especially her promise to scrutinise this budget very, very closely. And I join with her in noting that this is a very historic day, the first budget that's been presented by a female Chancellor. And I want to congratulate the Chancellor, and I'm sure she's blazing the trail for women and girls who are watching our proceedings today. Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no doubt about the enormous task that was facing the Chancellor today. After years of chaos and decline under the Conservatives, their appalling economic legacy, set out so clearly in the figures today, is being felt by people across the United Kingdom. So people were looking to this budget for a clean break with those failures of the last few years, for a sense of hope, urgency, and the promise of a fair deal. But I fear the budget won't deliver all that. The Conservatives left behind an enormous mess in our NHS, but I'm afraid it won't be fixed unless the government fixes social care too. The cost of living crisis won't be solved by hitting families, pensioners, family farms and struggling small businesses. And our economy won't grow strongly again unless we repair our broken relationship with Europe. So Liberal Democrats will continue to stand up for our constituents and press the government to be far bolder and act much faster on people's priorities. But having said that, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me also recognise there were some good things in the budget. Indeed, I would want to welcome the Chancellor's decision to move away from the Conservatives' broken fiscal rules to allow capital investment that our country so desperately needs. I was genuinely surprised, actually, that there was no recognition from the Leader of the Opposition of the difference between capital and current spending, which is the heart of this change. I'd like to welcome the promise of full compensation for the victims of the contaminated blood scandal and the Horizon scandal, and hope that that can be delivered quickly. And I want to welcome the extra investment in our NHS. Fixing the crisis in our NHS is literally a matter of life and death. And it's also essential for growing our economy by getting people off waiting lists, fit and healthy and back into work. The Conservative Party left a health service on its knees, and we on these benches have consistently argued for more investment across the NHS. In hospital buildings, extra GPs, cancer nurses, new radiotherapy machines and much more. So I'm glad the government and the Chancellor has been listening. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, people have heard bold promises of extra GPs and new hospitals before. The Conservative Party made similar promises on the NHS and then broke them. So what we need now is a guarantee that this government will deliver. So I can assure the Chancellor, Liberal Democrats will hold the government to account on its NHS plans. And I hope the budget document sets out in full the answers to some obvious questions. When will the funding be in place for desperately needed hospital projects? And when will those projects be completed? When will the government be able to guarantee that people can see a GP or an NHS dentist when they need one? When will all cancer patients be able to start treatment within the 62-day target and not have to wait for months? When will people know once more that when they call an ambulance, it will be there within minutes, not hours? And Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said before, above all, I worry that despite the welcome extra investment announced today, the government will not be able to fix the NHS because it is ignoring the elephant in the NHS waiting room, the crisis in social care. Yeah. We all know how bad it is. Hundreds of thousands of people waiting for care, many stranded in hospital beds because the care isn't in place for them to leave hospital. That's bad for them, it's bad for their loved ones, and bad for the NHS. I'm afraid today's announcement on social care just won't touch the sides. It's only a standstill in a crisis. So unless we finally tackle this problem, unless we finally agree a long-term solution for social care, we will never end the crisis in our health service either. So I urge the government once again, please start cross-party talks on care without further delay. And take action now. Any solution must involve paying care workers properly to fill the 130,000 care worker vacancies so elderly and disabled people can get the care they need. The government's plan for a fair pay agreement is a step in the right direction, but it's nowhere near enough. So will the Chancellor look at our plans for a special higher minimum wage for carers? And we mustn't forget the vital role of unpaid family carers. They're heroes, keeping the entire system afloat. So I strongly welcome the Chancellor's decision to raise the earnings limit for carers' allowance. It's a good first step. But as she knows and accepted in her speech, on its own, it will not end the repayment scandal or fix the system. So can the Chancellor confirm whether the earnings limit will now be pegged in the future to at least 16 hours a week at the minimum wage? And while I'm glad that the review, as she described it, will look again at getting rid of the cliff edge for carers' allowance and the earnings limit altogether, I hope she and her colleagues will look at a broader review to give family carers the support they deserve. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives' cost of living crisis has hit family carers particularly hard, but they are not alone. Practically no one has been left untouched by rising bills, higher mortgage payments and soaring food prices. And our small businesses and self-employed have experienced a crisis of their own, dealing first with the pandemic and then with a spike in energy prices and other input costs. The Conservatives only added to that pain, hitting struggling families with stealth tax rises, betraying pensioners when they broke the triple lock, and raising national insurance for our small businesses. So I do welcome, when it comes to the cost of living, the increase in the national minimum wage, although I urge the Chancellor to extend that higher wage to apprentices as well. But it is very concerning to see the Chancellor repeat a number of the Conservatives' mistakes today. Raising employers' national insurance is a tax on jobs and on people. The OBR report published today shows the budget will reduce real household incomes. And it will tax it will make the health and care crisis worse by hitting thousands of small care providers. Hitting family homes with inheritance tax changes isn't going to help. And cutting winter fuel payments will leave millions of vulnerable pensioners worried sick this winter. Instead of taking up Liberal Democrat proposals to raise the money we need, by reversing Conservative tax cuts for the big banks or asking the social media giants to pay a bit more, the Chancellor has chosen unfair tax hikes that will hurt small businesses and medium-sized businesses, the engines of our economy. They've already paid too high a price for the Conservatives' economic failures. Forcing them to pay even more simply isn't right. Another Conservative mess that I fear this budget will not begin to clean up is the crisis in local council funding. Year after year, we saw the last government slash funding while asking councils to do more and more. The result has been nothing short of a disaster. Spiralling social care costs are a huge part of this, and that's yet another reason why reform is so vital. But there's another black hole in council budgets, and that's due to the broken system for special educational needs. An extra £1 billion announced by the Chancellor is therefore welcome. And I pay tribute to my colleagues who have campaigned so hard on this, not least my honourable friend, the member for Twickenham. But I feel the crisis in SEND budgets that's been left by the Conservatives is much bigger than that. Last week, the National Audit Office laid bare the sheer scale of the problem, with half of children waiting more than the 20-week limit for an education, health and care plan, and 43% of councils at risk of bankruptcy. The severity of the crisis left by the Conservatives speaks for itself, and so we need to act with even greater urgency to tackle it. So we will be pressing the government to give this House a clear timeline for reform, because neither children, parents or councils can wait any longer. Madam Speaker, the Chancellor has said her main objective is economic growth, and she's right on that. We all agree that we need to get our economy growing strongly again so we can create the jobs and the opportunities for everyone and raise the money that our public services need. We need a real plan to do that, not just to stop things getting worse or just return to business as usual, but to build the economy of the future, an economy that is genuinely innovative, prosperous and fair. Part of that is fixing the health and care crisis. That will be crucial. So we're managing the public finances responsibly and giving businesses the certainty and stability they need to invest in our economy. And so we're investing in cheap, clean, renewable power to drive a strong recovery, bring down energy bills and create secure, well-paid jobs. And I welcome the steps the government has taken on this so far. But we must also back small businesses much more. They are the beating heart of our local economies. So I'd urge the Chancellor to go further than today's announcement on business rates and to make a historic change by overhauling the broken business rate system that's destroying our high streets and town centres. Tinkering around the edges simply won't be good enough any longer. And finally, Madam Speaker, one more crucial ingredient for growth: fixing our broken relationship with Europe. Removing the Conservatives' trade barriers would be a massive boost for British jobs, British business and the British economy. But by ruling out important steps like a youth mobility scheme or key long-term goals like membership of the single market, the government is trying to grow our economy with one arm tied behind its back. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in July, the British people kicked out of office one of the most damaging governments in our country's history. On the Conservatives' watch, we saw living standards fall, the economy stagnate, and public services decline. And no government would have an easy time turning that around. But people were looking to this budget for hope and a genuinely new direction, for urgent action to fix health and care crisis, for a break with the last government's mistakes on tax, for a plan to grow our economy and rescue local councils on the brink, for a fair deal. Yes, there were big and difficult decisions for the Chancellor to make, but I fear she has got too many of them wrong. We needed a different budget to repair the damage done to our country and to give people the fair deal they deserve. For our constituents, these benches will push the government to do far more for our economy, NHS and care. They are what Liberal Democrats will always champion.
I go to the chair of my old Select Committee, Business and Trade, Liam Byrne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me immediately add my congratulations to our first female Chancellor who delivered an outstanding budget settlement today. It's a great pleasure, Madam Deputy Speaker, to speak in the House this afternoon because this is the first